Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
or maybe evening.
Evening.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks.
Excellent, excellent. May I ask you to tell us your name and share a little bit about yourself so we may get to know you a little bit better? Anything you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure. My name is Chermaine Louise. I'm a Malaysian. I came to the US about 20 years ago for work. It's actually my husband came for his job, and we were only supposed to have been here on a 2-year assignment, and that now has worked out into 21 years and 3 kids later.
Wow,
So, yeah.
excellent. What kind of work do you do? What do you do?
I'm in human resources. So
Okay,
I'm with HR, so I do the whole gamut. So in the general field as opposed to compensation, one of the specialized. So I'm more of a generalist, yes.
so hire, fire, promote, pay, all that.
Yeah, so I'm a more of an advisor, trusted advisor in the role, and we like to have our management take accountability of those specific actions. So we work from behind the scenes, kind of thing. So I always like to say that HR is not the front facing or the client facing that everybody knows us, but we're more like the backbone of the organization. Yeah.
Got it. So let me ask you this question. Are you familiar with ATS, application tracking systems?
No.
So a lot of companies, especially very large companies, use something called ATS, application applicant tracking systems. And what these things do is, so if I apply for a job, it kind of goes through and say, let's say you had a job for a nurse. It kind of goes through and lists all the criteria for the nurse, and then I apply, and it takes the position and my background, and it marries them to find out where the common points are. And if there are enough common points, it then forwards it to the hiring manager. Um,
Okay.
Usually a lot of large companies like IBM and some of these companies who hire hundreds and thousands of
Mhm.
people have these kind of systems. Smaller companies may have a process that's more human interactive versus artificial intelligence driven, if that makes sense to you. The
Yeah.
reason why I
It,
ask you that question is because one of the things that we often hear about why there are not a lot of Black and brown people in leadership roles, people being paid significantly, is because of these kinds of processes that eliminate them, right? And so I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and a gentleman told me, he said, the way you crack the system is you copy the entire job description and put that in the bottom of your resume, and you're automatically guaranteed to get forwarded to the hiring manager. And I think that's a good hack, but I don't think that's reality. So in your years in your career, what do you think are the reasons why Black and brown people struggle to advance within companies or to get jobs of leadership within companies, are paid equitably? Women are paid less. What do you think some of the reasons why these things exist?
so I have to preface my answer to that question just because for the organization that I work for, it's an international organization. So it's although we do have some of the issues, but it is really very, very much in a bubble in a way, right?
Right.
So when we do recruitment, we have to and we make sure that our panels are very diverse in terms of gender, in terms of nationalities. So that has to be very diverse. And then even when it comes to the short list, right, of the applicants, that has to be very diverse as well, because that diversity and inclusion is very much a part of our agenda on a day-to-day basis. And especially in light of what's going on right now in the US, it has taken a much more front seat in this.
Mhm.
So short lists which I may see or a vice president may see which is not diverse, it gets kicked back.
Good.
It
Excellent.
gets kicked back, and the panel will have to relook at it. And we always strive to make sure that panel members, shortlisting, interviews, every process, every stage, that at the end of when you make a selection, nobody can come back and say or pull a race card, right, on us. So that is it is ingrained in the processes that we're trying, that we have in place.
Mhm.
Of course, not to say that that's always 100%,
Mhm.
right? But for the 20 years that I've been with this institution, I have to say that as far as long as I've been involved in it, and I know majority of my colleagues are, is that the fairness is there.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful to hear that. I think your company may be unique in that because I will tell you,
Mhm.
a lot of organizations struggle with diversity and inclusion, and now they've added the new term belonging. But it's kind of one of those things where you have to wonder why this is such an issue. And I mean, it falls down gender lines, falls down ethnicity lines, it falls down education. I mean, all of these things are components of why we have a system where predominantly white men are in charge, because that's just how, specifically in America, and I can't speak internationally, but specifically in America, that is indeed the case. And we, as a Black people and brown people, struggle with this, figuring out how do we do it, because we've been muted for so long. Being able to be comfortable going up and saying, well, I want to raise, or you should hire this person, has adverse reactions for us, as opposed to some of the positive things for white men. If they were to go in with that much I wouldn't even say aggression, but that much assertiveness would be considered, harmful to our careers, where it's not in their career. So it's good to know that you're a company and there are companies out there that put this as a priority, because I think your point was very much on point, that you have diverse people in the interviewing process to review the resumes, to look at these things and say, yes, this person is a good fit, or no, as opposed to something obvious as they went to a historically Black college, or they didn't go to a top 15 college or something like that. They're just, so that's wonderful to hear. So,
Yeah.
but from the lens of outside of your environment, and I take it you have only been in that one job your entire time here, so you've been in that sweet spot for a long time. So, when you go to conferences or go to other things, do you hear people talk about these issues that I've identified?
Um, no, not really. And like I said, and one of the things, it is very much that this organization, it's we have our in-house training where we do call experts in, right? We do have people who do go out, but HR per se, you've got our shrimp, it's more or less international organizations which get together and have conferences, more so than having it with the term that we use is corporate America,
Uh-huh.
right? But again, we are very much aware because the organization does have Black and brown
Mm-hmm.
and other people of color. The organization, we do have those, and we understand what is going on. And I think the way that we look at it as well is not, it's yes, all these conversations have stemmed from what has happened in the US. But for example, in Malaysia, right? Um, I'm of Indian descent,
Mm-hmm.
which means I'm also a minority in that country. And have we also been facing racism and systemic racism for years? Yes, we have, right? So we recognize that it is in all the different pockets in Africa, in Asia, Southeast Asia, especially. We've got them in India, and it just goes, it's not so much then race, but it goes down to, they've got tribal issues. It's got this, we tend to say there's no caste in India, but it's still being talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about have racism within the organization, it is also with that lens that it's a wider view in terms of what's happening to our people in the sense of those of us who make up the organization and what happens in those countries. So we have to be very careful in when we speak about it as well, because we don't want to feel that anybody is, one is more superior than the other within the organization.
Yeah, that makes perfectly good sense. So
Mm.
tell me, how do you identify? So do you identify as a person of color? What is your gender identity?
I do identify as a person of color. And when we've been having conversations in the organization about racism and what's happening, and although I was I'll repeat something that I told my team when we were speaking. I said, yes, we're very protected within the four walls of our organization. But the minute I step out that glass doors, my world is very different.
Right.
You know, I've got three kids, and my son, who is now in college, uh, they don't like the fact that I track, not to say I track them, but I've got their movements on my phone, not because I want to know where they are, but if in case I just don't hear from them,
Right.
I look up to see where they are. I wouldn't necessarily have done that at any other point in time or anywhere else, but it's the reality of the environment within which I live.
Absolutely.
So it is scary.
Mm-hmm.
The kids are also very much aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
They've gone through their own issues and situations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not perfect, right? But again, I'm not going to say that just because I work for an international organization and we have everything is fine within the four walls, that the minute I step out at 6 o'clock or whatever that is, it's a very different reality. And this is also the same thing, which my brother couldn't understand why I was so behind the Black Lives Matter movement. He could not understand because he says, for him, it's like, yeah, but we also have this in Malaysia. We're also facing this. I said, yes, but my kids are not growing up there. I'm not living there. I'm living here. This is my reality. This is their reality.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to do what I need to do in order to protect them. Because at the end of the day, I'm not a citizen here. Okay, I'm on a visa, and I can leave the country
Mm-hmm.
and go back home.
Yeah.
Take the home back to Malaysia. But these kids aren't. This is home for them.
Right.
This is it. So until then, I feel that I need to create an environment or a space for them which I think is conducive and which is safe, and bring awareness to them that when I'm no longer here, they are able to so they're not living in a bubble and say, oh, this won't touch me, and say, we never know.
Never know. Yep. And I think that one of the interesting pieces about that, I do the exact same thing. Both of my children are adults, and I have find them on my phone, because if I don't hear from them in a certain amount of time, I'm calling or texting something. Where are you? Is everything okay? So I absolutely identify with that. I think it's really interesting. So let me ask you a question for those who don't know, and maybe I'm not even sure I am 100% sure. Where is Malaysia in the world? Is it near India? Is it Philippines? Where is it?
Okay, so it's Southeast Asia. So if you it's the peninsula of Thailand. So Thailand is directly north of us, and right at the bottom of us is Singapore. So
Yeah,
we're the peninsula there, Southeast Asia.
that makes
So
perfect.
the country is made out of it's got three main races, and then you've got a small minority. But within the three main races, so basically it's like we're all immigrants to the country. So you've got your Malays, your Chinese, your Indians, and then you've got another group which we term them as others, but because there's so many subgroups kind of thing. So in a but still there is a sense of superiority just because of the laws of the land and things like that. We're not fighting each other, and touch wood for that, but you've still got all these subtle nuances which do happen, and you know you live within. And up to the time that I was growing up, it wasn't that obvious. Everybody was co-mingling and everything else. But I think it's become it's becoming more and more of an issue which needs to be tackled head on. And I hope the country does that at some point in time. But so uh, I've grown up with that as well.
Yeah. Are your parents still there? Are your parents there?
I,
Your parents are here in the United States.
no, my parents are back in
Okay.
Malaysia, so we came because of our jobs.
Right.
And so and we're here based on visa. Yeah.
And how often do you go back and see your parents? Have your kids gone back to Malaysia? Do they know, the country and what exists there compared to what exists here in America?
So yes, I make it a point to visit my parents at least twice a year.
So,
With the pandemic, I've not seen them for a year, so that's really been really hard. The kids do go back. We try to take them home, although they're adults, and we get out pushback every now and then. But every other year, we make it a point to take them back, just because their grandparents are there. But for them, it's a holiday destination.
yeah.
Great food, great beaches, but the actual country and what it's gone through and what it's going through, no, that's lost on them. They're much more, they identify with the US, and rightly so, because they're all citizens, right?
Right.
And the issues, they can speak of it. They're much more aware of what's going on here.
Yeah. What's the national language in Malaysia? Is it English, or is there other languages that people there speak?
So it's Bahasa Malaysia is the national language. It is almost very similar to what is spoken in Indonesia.
Okay.
And then different races. So the Chinese will have their Mandarin and their Cantonese, and on some of their other dialects, and the Indians as well. So we have Tamil for the South Indians. We've got the Hindi. So there's a whole. I think, and English is taught in schools. So I think on average, every person knows about 2 to 3 languages.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
impressive. Yeah, so you can measure a man's intelligence by how many languages he can speak fluently. That's wonderful. So being here in America, and regardless of whether you were on a visa or not, you were in America, you spent a good portion of your life here in America. So you have adapted to the country and some of our behaviors and things like that. Can you make a comparison to Malaysia with America? Is there anything that's similar or so dissimilar that they stand out to you?
I think the biggest thing for me is kids, the way that you bring up children, right? So in Malaysia, for example, in schools, what a teacher says or what a parent says, that is it. That is the rule of the house, or the rule. I've said it. What I say is what goes, kind of thing, as a mom, right?
Yeah.
But whereas I find here, you talk it through. You ask for expressions, and you give that space to kids. So sometimes for an Asian mom or an Asian parent, that just may be a bit too much, right? It's I told you to do it, just get it done. I don't want to hear, 6 different ways of why you don't want to do it and finally get to it. Just get to it. So I think that is one of the things that, so when I take, when the kids were growing up and we were going home, that is one of the things which my mom and dad just could not get their heads around. It was like, we did not give you room to say no. So why are your kids, arguing, spending half an hour arguing with you in something which they should just go and do? So that was an interesting part, I think, because just seeing my parents kind of interacting with them, and myself with them, it was very different.
Yeah, that sounds very different, but it also sounds very, very much like normal families, right? So, maybe going back a few hundred years, Black children did not talk back to their parents, because I remember growing up, you could not say what. If your mother called your name, you did not say what. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Right? Not anything but that, because if not, something bad was going to happen to you. And I think both of my children still speak that way. Both of my children say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And I think that's part of inherently of who my family was and going back generations. But younger people now feel empowered to challenge their parents or to be conversant with their parents in areas where they had not before. So there's a lot there in that space. So you know, it's very good to know that it's not just unique to America, it's everywhere, right?
No,
You
I
know,
I think it's a huge learning curve for me as well. Just there's so many times I just want to say, I told you to do it, just do it.
but
Don't question me.
yep,
You're under my that whole bit. You're under my roof. I'm paying your bills. You
yes,
just do what I
do
tell
it,
you to do.
right.
Um, but as they're growing up and they're off at university and they come back and we have these conversations, I like it. I like to see that they are maturing in their thought. They are aware of situations and issues and are able to actually have an opinion of it. I think it's very important that young people today are not fence sitters
Hmm.
and that they do have an opinion, one way or another, right or wrong. I mean, for me, there's no right or wrong. It's you must be able to back up your decision in what you think, and having them gone through that whole process of being brought up the way they're being brought, that they have been, as opposed to with how I would have brought them up if they were in Malaysia. I think where I see them today is what I am most happy about, because if I'd done it any other way, they may not, be able to tell me, look here, this is not right what you're saying about, whatever the issue is. And I think it's important.
Yeah, as long as they're not disrespectful, right? They can express their
Exactly.
opinion.
Yes,
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 they can
yes.
express their opinion, but not be so disrespectfully.
Correct. The big, yeah. And that's, I think it's well known in the house that both the dad and I do not tolerate disrespect at all.
Yeah,
So, and I do see that, that they give that to everybody. And
yeah,
some of my proud moments when I see that happening with their kids. Yeah.
absolutely. That sounds absolutely wonderful. That sounds like you've been a great mom and you've done really great things to bring your
Thank you.
kids along. Thank you for sharing that. I want to go back to something you said earlier. You said that you have kind of paid attention to and recognized the Black Lives Matter uh, protests that are going on and some of the things about Black Lives Matter. And if I'm right, you identify as brown, not black. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if I say to you Black Lives Matter and you're brown, what do you hear? Did I just say that your life did not matter, or did I just say that Black Lives Matter? What did you hear when I said that?
No, absolutely not. I don't think it's a matter of my life, so to speak, being diminished, but I think I've also taken the time to try to understand where the whole BLM movement has come from. Of course, I've not taken American history, but I've tried to read, I've tried to educate myself. The kids have taken it, so of course we have the conversations about that, and recognizing that there has been so much done against the Black community, that to say Black Lives Matter is to say, we there can't be a full community if there's part of the community which is not being recognized or constantly being, what's the word, pushed aside or shoved aside, and not given the same equality. So Black Lives Matter to me means equality.
Yeah. And I think that's right too. I think one of the things that a lot of other races don't recognize is that, and you said you had not taken American history, but like Africans were brought to this country in chains for the purpose of growing the economic foundation of what is America today. Cotton was the product, then it became rice and it was sugar and all these things. And families were literally destroyed. Black men were hung,
Mhm.
Black women were raped. I mean, you have all of that going back, to the first colonists coming here. And you also have indigenous people who were, uprooted from their land. So, when you hear white supremacists and people talk about, this is their land, I always wonder what the context is, because you had indigenous people who were here long before you came here, thousands of years before you came here, and you're talking about, this is your country. What is it to them? Because you put them in in tribes in remote areas, and you built casinos so
Right.
you can have an income, but you have high prevalence of alcoholism, or high prevalence of uneducation, and all of these things to people who was here before any of us came here. And to further that, every advantage that has happened to Black people has meant the same thing for brown people and yellow people, and even in some cases white females, right? Because Black men
Right.
were given the right to vote before white women were, right? So
Hmm.
there's that. Every struggle that we have had has meant that for every other ethnicity except for white men, and that's the exception. So I think when I hear Black Lives Matter, I think I hear people crying to, have their lives matter, right? So that you don't shoot someone in the back 7 times who's going into his car. You have all kinds of other weapons that you could use. So why is this? Or you don't shoot someone because of the way they look. Some young boy walking through a neighborhood with a hood on and eating some Skittles does not become a victim of a neighborhood watch lunatic, right? You don't have that, So I think that for me, Black Lives Matter does not minimize your life at all, because your life matters. White people's lives matters. Whoever you are, your life matters. But the analogy that I try to use is like a fire. Somebody calls the fire department because there's a house down the street on fire, and the fire truck comes and he starts putting water on the houses that are perfectly fine. He lets the other houses burn to the ground. That's Black Lives Matter, right? Because we are in the middle of a crisis within our country. And it's not a new crisis. This has been going on since we got here. It's just now people have technology and they can show it, right? You can see it on
Hmm.
screens, you can see it. So that's why it's more of a conversation, but it has existed for hundreds of years in various forms. I think the difference is less of us are dying, but we're still dying. And we're dying now on television. We're dying now on social media. We're dying in all these things. So if my life does not matter, then it will be hard for your life to matter, because you
Matter.
are, you know, we are the minority, right? So all lives has to matter, but Black lives need help right now. So I think it's very wonderful that you are catching up and understanding how that works, because I think that if Black and brown communities could ever come together, we would be a powerful force for the country and for good and for diversity. And it's wonderful to hear what you said about your company, that you all pay attention to that. If we could only get the whole country to see that and see the value of that, that would be wonderful. So my last question I have to ask you. So when you have just one son?
I've got one son, two daughters. Yes.
So when your children are away from you and they are out and about wherever they are, at college or wherever they are, and they encounter law enforcement, do you worry that they could be a George Floyd or I can't remember the man's name in Rochester, but do you think that could happen to your children? Do you worry about that happening to your children?
Oh, absolutely. Very much so. And that's why, I always tell my son to, even if he's driving from here back to college, he's in UMD, which is not very far, that he texts me the minute he gets there.
Yeah.
Or I always tell him, please don't speed, because he's got a tendency to speed. And I'll say, please don't speed, use your blinkers, make sure your car is in full working order. Yes, I do fear for him. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think all mothers do. They have Black or brown children. There's that fear that you encounter someone who's not willing to show empathy to you or to see the value of you simply because the color of your skin or the texture of your hair is different from theirs. So I think that's important. Well, thank you so much for answering all my questions. We have about 3 or 4 minutes. I'm going to leave the remainder of time to you to say whatever you wish to say. So please.
No, I just want to say thank you for having me on. I think these chats and bringing awareness is very important, in the sense that there is a lot of educating which needs to happen. There's a lot of awareness that still needs to take place. And so I thank you
Absolutely.
for having me on and giving me the space to talk to you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I thank you for bringing us up to date, because I'm sure a lot of us are not aware of the differences in other countries that are similar to what happens here in America. You know, and I mean, the way you describe Malaysia, I might need to go there and see it myself because I need some beauty in my life right now. So, uh,
Oh, it's beautiful. Yes.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. As soon as the video converts, I will send you a link to it. Please watch it and let me know if I may upload it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye-bye.